Welcome back. The DOJ may or may not choose to go after Mr. Trump after the committee finishes its work. But either way, the former president will be tried in the court of public opinion. The hearings may be resonating with voters in a way that could seriously impact Republican support for Mr. Trump as the party's 2024 candidate. Joining me now to discuss this, John Podhoretz, editor of Commentary Magazine, and Democratic strategist Basil Smikle. Thanks to both of you for being here. Really appreciate it. So I was getting texts from Republicans during this hearing. One of them said to me, "This is devastating for former President Trump politically." The reason why, no, more people are not going to come out and start speaking out against him, but it just starts to chip away at his support around the edges, they say, particularly when it comes to moderate Republicans and independents. John, how true is that?
I mean, I think it's corrosive. I think it can be corrosive, and we see polling data that suggests that his standing among Republicans is declining, that there are significant numbers of Republicans who are looking for an alternative. But I do have a caveat, which is that in the case of, say, Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, not today's, but there are a couple of details that are not fixed. And Zoe Lofgren, the California Democrat who was on the committee and talked about Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel's testimony, said they did not attempt to corroborate the testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson. That's not their purpose. That was a very, very, very bad thing that she did, because that gives the lie to the idea that they are a fact-finding commission and not simply just building a kind of prosecutorial case, and they don't want any possible alternate accounts of what happened on January 6th. I think that is the sort of thing Trump can use to leverage himself back in the idea that he's being mishandled by the committee.
So I'm glad that you raised that point, right? Because, and that actually is supported by my reporting, Basil, the fact that the committee never directly asked Pat Cipollone. We saw that today to corroborate what we heard from Cassidy Hutchinson. You were looking for a split screen of the two of them kind of echoing each other, and that didn't happen. Legal experts say there's still no smoking gun against former President Trump.
Well, I tend to agree with that. And I think you're absolutely right. There is no smoking gun. What we heard at the end about the witness tampering, maybe there's something. But again, I don't know if any of that amounts to him being walked off in handcuffs, which I think a lot of voters are looking for, but don't think will ever really happen. And at the end of all of this, the committee doesn't really have any teeth. They can't actually, bring charges and arrest it. Everything's got to go to DOJ. So again, at the end of all of this whole conversation, of all of these hearings, I think he does get made unelectable in a primary. I do think that. But down ballot is where I get more concerned. In a primary?
You think he's unelectable in a primary?
I think the goal here is to make him unelectable in a primary.
Let's look at the numbers, okay, because there are these new numbers from the New York Times Siena College poll, and they're pretty stark. First of all, you have President Biden beating former President Trump by 3 points. You also have these numbers out today with Trump at 49%, Ron DeSantis at 25%, Ted Cruz at 7%, Pence at 6%, Haley at 6%, Pompeo at 2%. Bottom line, Trump's below 50%. Now, he still wins it, John. But if you're in the former president's camp, those numbers have to be disconcerting.
I think they are disconcerting for him. In the Republican primaries in 2016, he did not get more than 45% of the aggregate vote. Because they have a winner-take-all structure in the Republican primary system. He won convincingly, but what this suggests, if these numbers are correct or following, is that Trump's support is declining to the place that it was when he ran in 2016. That his dominance of the Republican Party, his control of the Republican Party electorate, is not what it was.
And Basil, at the same time, he did win in 2016. He did win the nomination despite conventional wisdom suggesting otherwise.
Well, the two things. One, I don't think the dynamic of him being able to pick off everyone on the debate stage that you saw in 2016, I don't think that that dynamic can hold true in 2024, because the conversation is just going to be different, and people are used to seeing him in that regard, number one. And number two, one of the problems is actually on the Democratic side, that we talked a lot about fear, and Hillary Clinton said chapter and verse what was going to happen. Some of us didn't believe her. But there is now a bit more proof there. And I think if we combine a good message with the right messenger, then I think on the Democratic side, then you have a good sort of counter narrative.
Okay, go ahead, John.
I just want to say one thing, which is the numbers in the New York Times poll indicate that Democrats and the American people in general are very concerned about Biden's age, right?
64% of Democrats saying that they want a different candidate.
But they're very concerned about Biden's age. So Trump ain't no spring chicken. I mean, the best Republican line against Biden, aside from policy questions, is, look, he's just too old. He'll be 82. He's too old. That line can be used against Trump. Ron DeSantis is 43 years old.
Well, and that's why I lay out that poll, because when you look at it, he's really, at this point, we're so early, it's hard to even talk about it, but he's really the only one who would give Mr. Trump a run for his money, it seems. And of course, he's at 25% now. But if he were to actually campaign, who knows what would happen? Or would he get into the race, though, if the former president ran? I want to ask you, though, Basil, about the Democrats' numbers, because you have these just staggering numbers. 64% of Democrats saying they don't want to see former President Biden run again in 2024. So does he need to change his messaging? Does he need to get more legislation passed? What does he need to do in order to see those numbers?
Interesting, because I was talking to one of my students, and she said the same thing about Joe Biden, but she loved Bernie Sanders. I was like, but they're right. So but that's an important difference, because Bernie has that energy and he's speaking directly to policy that engages young people. What I think Joe Biden needs to do is more of that and actually get some more wins under the belt. And the Democrats need to keep talking more about that, because, we can, gun control is obviously very important. Working with the governors to shore up abortion rights, extraordinarily important. But there got to be some small pieces that he can go out there and start talking about, and he should give his vice president a little more opportunity to shine. There are a lot of Democrats that feel she's been too behind the scenes, and I think that actually can help his numbers.
John?
I just think he's too old. I mean, I don't know what to say. Look, I don't like his policies. I think he's been a bad president. I don't like how he's handled inflation. He's going to be 82 years old on Inauguration Day 2025. That is too old.
The White House says there's nothing we can do about that. That's the one thing we can't impact. Let me ask you, though. I mean, if former President Trump does announce, and there are some concerns that he will announce this summer, and then the midterms will be all about Mr. Trump. Do you think that we will see other Republicans like Ron DeSantis get into the race now that we're seeing some of these numbers come out?
I think some very serious people are going to run against Trump in the end. I did not think this 2 months. Well, DeSantis is the obvious. You never know what people have that might keep them from jumping in. DeSantis is the obvious person. There are others. You can't look at these numbers and say somebody's not going to say, look, this is my moment. Trump could collapse on a stage. There are things that can happen. He's 76 years old and not fit. Biden's 79 and he's pretty fit, and he fell off that bicycle. All Trump has to do is trip, and he's in trouble.
Well, because we're talking about the hearings, I want to continue to kind of explore the potential political fallout of these hearings. Basil, do you worry that they could backfire against Democrats, that they could appear to be overly politicized?
Sure, and I think to some extent a lot of Republicans feel that already, and that's something that we have to concern ourselves with. But I go back to the first impeachment. Voters coming up to me and said, how are you going to hold Donald Trump accountable? The fact that this is happening is that accountability argument. And again, I don't know that a lot of voters think that they're going to see Donald Trump walking out in handcuffs, but they want to know that Democrats are actually telling the story, and they've told a fantastic narrative about what the Trump White House was like in those final days.
John, to raise a point that we always hear from Chuck, what happens if Trump runs, if he loses, and if he doesn't concede?
Well, nothing good. I mean, I do think...
Is that a concern amongst Republicans, do you think?
It should be. So far, I see no indication that it is. I do think that there is now an immense amount of emotional preparation for that possibility, and a lot of shoring up that can be done. And just remember that Trump will not be president if he doesn't win, right? He will be the guy who didn't win. I don't know where Biden will be, whether he will be the nominee or not the nominee. But he won't be sitting in the White House making these plans. And one thing you can say about the Stop the Steal people and whatever conspiracies they're up to, they're frightening, but they're little Keystone cops, and they seem a little, bonkers. And I don't know that they'll be able to pull off a massive national Civil War confrontation.
Though I just say very quickly, if you're a person of color, or I imagine if you're a woman, given what's happening at the Supreme Court, Keystone cops perhaps, but that's still got to put a credible amount of fear in you, because you just don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
I don't even think you need that ideological frame. I think you can be frightened simply by the idea that people don't accept the results of an election that's fair.
Great conversation. Thank you, John and Basil. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being here on set.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.